It has to go. Selfish. You've used me from the start, Tommy. You're wearing my helmet.
Technoblade, you said we betrayed you. You said we were the ones that betrayed you.
You betrayed me like 12 times.
Technoblade, look at me. Look at me right now.
Oh my God.
You said you hated governments. You said we were the ones that betrayed you. But you're the one that killed Tubbo when Jake Slat told you to. You're the one that betrayed us out of all of this, Technoblade. Your friends. Listen to me. Listen to me. Your friends.
This has basically been how every interaction between Tommyinnit and Technoblade has gone over the past few months of the Dream SMP. Throughout their incredibly rocky relationship, from unlikely allies to bitter rivals to reluctant partners to bitter rivals again, this theme of betrayal has followed them through the SMP storyline like a Hypixel player following someone with the YouTube rank. It's also completely divided a big part of the Dream SMP fandom, with Technoblade and Tommy apologists going absolutely rabid on Twitter and Instagram and Tumblr and LiveLeak nearly every other day about which of the two is the real, tragic, betrayed, righteous victim. But who's actually the victim? Was either person really in the right at all? Or has it all just been one big string of self-centered miscommunications between two deeply divided and at the same time incredibly similar characters? And on that note, is there any genuine hope for them to see eye to eye? Now, disclaimer, I do not have a PhD in Minecraft roleplay character analysis. I'm not Tommyinnit and I'm not Technoblade. These are my personal interpretations of the characters they've created, and certainly not the only way to interpret them. The beauty of the Dream SMP is that the characters have infinite interpretations depending on who you are and what you believe. If you don't explicitly agree with me, don't lose your shit in the comments. Go make your own video. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, I'd love to hop straight into my deep, serious psychoanalysis of block betrayal on Minecraft.com, but the Dream SMP timeline has become so convoluted that it's hard to figure out what betrayals I'm even referencing. So let me lay the two most relevant ones out in a nice little chart, starting with a betrayal that really hit home for so many fans of the SMP. Looking at you, Bedrock Boys supporters, and everyone who's still in denial that Techno can death the SBI family dynamic. Alright, everybody ready? Strapped in? Got your G Fuel in one hand and your pacifier in the other? Okay, here's a summary. Tommyinnit hides out in Technoblade's house following his escape from exile. Technoblade finds him, and after much back and forth offers him shelter in exchange for an alliance and Tommy's help in taking down L'Manberg. Technoblade is very transparent with Tommy about his end goal, which is to destroy L'Manberg once and for all. Tommy agrees to help him despite very obviously not supporting this end goal, because helping Technoblade furthers Tommy's immediate, somewhat selfish desire to retrieve the music discs, his most prized possessions. Tommy becomes Theseus, Technoblade's secret weapon against L'Manberg and partner in crime. The two work together and slowly begin to bond. Things are starting to look up for the Bedrock Boys. They even start to trust each other to the point where Techno claims that Tommy
wouldn't lie to me, Dream. He'd lie to you, but he wouldn't lie to me.
When talking about the destruction of the community house. In the end, they almost come to consider each other friends. Everything goes south when Tommy's motivation for helping Techno is taken away. The discs are given to Dream, and Techno still plans to blow up L'Manberg. Suddenly, Tommy has no external motivation to stick with Techno. He turns on him, despite everything they've been through and despite their recently established friendship, rejoining Tubbo and L'Manberg and promising to help protect it from Techno's wrath. He betrays him. But wait, doesn't this sound really familiar? Haven't we, I don't know, seen this exact same situation play out somewhere long, long ago in a ravine system far, far away? Let me tell you the story again. Technoblade makes his way to the Dream SMP because he hears there's a revolution afoot and wants to be in on it. He's taken in by Tommy and Wilbur, and after much back and forth is accepted as an ally to the Pogtopian cause at his own request. Pogtopia is very transparent about their end goal, which is to take down Schlatt and eventually regain control of their country, along with their democratically elected president, Wilbur. And yes, I say democratically. Pog 2020 won the majority vote. Schlatt 2020 and Swag 2020's pooled vote, done without the consent or knowledge of the citizens of L'Manberg, can't be considered democratic. I don't think. I didn't pay attention to government. If I'm wrong, oh well, democracy is overrated anyway. Technoblade agrees to help them despite very obviously not supporting this end goal, because helping Pogtopia furthers Techno's immediate, somewhat selfish lust for chaos and violence against established governments. Techno becomes the Blade, Pogtopia's secret weapon against Manberg and partner in crime. They have their ups and downs, but for the most part, Tommy and the Pogtopians begin to bond with Technoblade. They start to consider each other friends as well as just allies, and they even begin to trust him, to a point where they're willing to believe and forgive him after he aids J-Schlatt in executing Tubbo during the Manberg Festival. Everything goes south when Techno's motivation for helping Tommy and the Pogtopians is taken away. Schlatt is defeated, and the Pogtopians still plan on taking over and reinstating a new government. Techno now has no external motivation to stick with them. Technoblade turns on the Pogtopians, despite their established friendships and everything they've been through, helping to blow up Manberg and kill many of its inhabitants, specifically targeting Tommy.
We've got Manberg for each other.
He betrays them.
Hero, Tommy? Then die like one!
And there it is. Tommy and Technoblade have literally repeated history. And personally, I don't think it's just a coincidence. I think it's a symptom of the two characters being much more alike than either would ever admit. Both are incredibly opinionated and stubborn, willing to fight to the death to defend what they think is right. Their dedication to their respective core beliefs is one of their biggest strengths. Tommy's devotion to his friends and his country, as well as his disdain for anyone who would hurt them, is probably his most deeply rooted ideal. Freedom through community, for lack of a better term, is his core belief. On the other hand, Technoblade's most fundamental ideology is that government is inherently bad, and that anarchy is the only moral, just path for society. Freedom through anarchy, for lack of a better term, is his core belief. And that's what makes the two betrayals so interesting. Both are founded on an incredibly stubborn, passionate character actively going against their own moral code. Both choose to sacrifice their deeply held beliefs about right and wrong in favor of immediate gratification and short-term desire. For Technoblade, this was sacrificing his intense opposition to all government and working with Pogtopia despite their very obvious plans to take back Manberg and reinstate a democracy in order to indulge his own bloodlust and love of destruction. For Tommy, this was sacrificing his loyalty to both his friends and his country, actively working against them with Technoblade, all in pursuit of his music discs. Both fell victim to their own egotism, temporarily losing sight of what they truly believed in and falling down the rabbit hole of self-indulgence. Both characters essentially put up blinders, tunneling in on their immediate, self-centered goals and ignoring, consciously or unconsciously, that the very obvious end results would be in direct conflict with their moral codes. So, what caused the blinders to finally come down? What caused the two characters to finally recognize their respective loss of self and make the choice to betray in order to regain it? Now, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that at this point I am one of the 100 monkeys blindly smashing a keyboard hoping I'll write a Wattpad fanfiction. The word betrayal has literally lost all meaning. I don't think I've ever used it more than I have writing this. It literally means nothing to me. I look at it and it's just a bunch of shapes and lines. My IQ is dropping faster than Schlatt's public approval rating. I am in so much pain. Anyway, let's talk about when the third betrayal, and yes, I said third betrayal, is finally realized. And it's not one that involves swords, or sides, or even people. It's a betrayal of self. The very distinct moment Techno and Tommy acknowledge that they've betrayed themselves, betrayed their most basic beliefs, in pursuit of superficial gratification. Let's talk about the moment of clarity. For Technoblade, this comes during Tubbo's inaugural speech, directly after Schlatt's death and the defeation of Manberg. Surrounded by the cheers of people who have come to trust and respect him, Dream himself whispers in Techno's ear. "I never thought you'd bow to Tommyinnit," he says. "I thought you hated government." Now, I wouldn't say Dream's words were what necessarily prompted Techno's betrayal, but instead were what forced him to see the situation for what it really was. Dream essentially called his bluff, forcing Techno's blinders down. He could no longer pretend that what he was doing was anything other than aiding in the reinstitution of a government. With Schlatt and Manberg gone, Techno no longer had any buffer between his actions and his ideologies. He had to make a choice. Stay faithful to Pogtopia and give up his vow of anarchy, or betray the Pogtopians and return to his true values, the ones he knew to be morally correct. And I think we all know how that turned out. Team Chaos? Dream asks. Team Chaos.
Everyone, the government ends here!
For Tommy, the moment of clarity comes during his brawl with Tubbo in the ruins of the community house. He snaps, screaming.
But the discs were worth more than you ever were.
He doesn't even need somebody else to call him out. In that moment, he calls himself out, putting into words his own self-betrayal. He's placed the discs over the lives and livelihoods of both the people he cares about and the nation he fought so hard to protect. There's an obvious pause. A moment of silence where Tommy realizes what he said. And then...
Give him the disc.
Now he doesn't have the goal of retrieving the discs to hide behind. He now has to actively make the choice. Technoblade and revenge? Or Tubbo and forgiveness? Even if choosing one means betraying the other. And,
Tommy, what are you saying?
I'm sorry.
well,
What do you mean, Tommy?
I'm with Tubbo.
so now we've come full circle. Technoblade is betrayed and now felt the sting of betrayal. Tommy has been betrayed and now himself become the betrayer. And to them, their actions feel justified. To them, the betrayal is anything but. Their idea of making things right, both to the world and to themselves, is to betray. And so no wrong is ever acknowledged, and nothing is ever made right. Both characters dig themselves into Y11 level denial, because they don't want to admit that they essentially punished others in order to fix their own mistakes. Neither wants to admit that they bonded with the enemy, gained their trust, and came to care about them, only to then stab them in the back once their interests no longer aligned, figuratively and in Techno's case literally. And so they each develop their own coping mechanisms, their own little ways of avoiding guilt, coping with trauma, and convincing themselves that they are unequivocally in the right. Technoblade develops a victim complex the size of the crater he blew in L'Manberg, convincing himself that he was somehow tricked by Tommy and the Pogtopians, insisting that none of them ever cared about him, that they purposefully manipulated and used him, and that they all deserved the pain, violence, and destruction he brought upon them. Tommy, on the other hand, accepts what he's done but refuses to acknowledge Technoblade's capacity for emotion, that he might be capable of feeling hurt by Tommy's actions. Tommy brands him a selfish, cold-hearted monster who doesn't deserve respect. Who, again, deserves to be betrayed. Each projects a semi-fabricated caricature of immorality onto the other without having the development or maturity necessary to actually communicate in a productive way. During the final Doomsday battle, we see them standing on opposite sides of a literal crater, screaming at each other about how betrayed they feel. But both are just yelling. Neither is listening. Techno cries that he was never treated like a person, while failing to realize that it was his own acts of brutality and callousness, his own destructive cruelty towards those he felt wronged by or who didn't align with his political beliefs, that led people to perceive him as a monster. Tommy cries that Techno never listened to him, that Techno never respected or cared about anybody but himself, while failing to realize that it was his own lack of self-control and awareness, his own habit of stealing and lying and failing to treat others with basic decency, that kept Techno from respecting him in return. And therein lies the catch. There is no one-sided solution to mend the broken bond between the two characters. No singular magic apology one can make to the other, no favor or adventure that will suddenly revive the Bedrock boys as we once knew them.
Thank you.
No problem,
Because
Tommy.
at the end of the day, Tommy and Techno fundamentally don't understand each
Using
other.
words, but the thing about this world, Tommy, is that the only universal language is violence.
Or themselves.
And we've had that conversation. We've spoken that language in the pit.
Neither are inherently evil people. In fact, both have been shown to be capable of incredible kindness and selflessness, especially when it comes to the people and places they care about. But both are also single-minded. Both can be incredibly self-absorbed and hold irrational, damaging grudges. I think the only chance for reconciliation between the two is if both undergo massive character growth. If both are able, whether it be an active choice or something forced upon them by loss or circumstance, to bite back their hubris and attempt to empathize with one another. to listen without shouting over the other or attempting to invalidate their emotions, to acknowledge their similarities, their shared desires for justice and freedom from tyranny, their shared relationships with people on the server, their shared kindness and loyalty towards those they care about, rather than their differences. And maybe, just maybe, acknowledge their own mistakes and offer up some genuine apologies. While of course resolution arcs aren't required for characters in conflict, I think Technoblade and Tommy overcoming their rivalry would be symbolic of something bigger, not just for the characters, but for the server itself, and the systemic patterns of destruction and hatred that cripple it. Because in a world where violence has been established as the universal language, embracing forgiveness and empathy is an act of rebellion.
And for the record, I think Jack Manifold is the real tragic victim of the SMP, but we'll save that for another day. Hee 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 hoo hoo hoo.